Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Stephen Pynakker, and I'm very excited about this panel discussion that we're about ready to commence. But I just wanted to say a few personal things. I've mentioned this on a live stream the other day, but I just wanted to share with my audience a couple things that have recently happened. Of course, many of you know, I've suffered some hearing loss and some health issues over the last year. I went completely deaf in this right ear, and it was replaced with a high-pitched tinnitus with hypoacusis, which is intense. I was basically living this way. I was in bedridden for a month and a half. Then, of course, my mom had two hospitalizations. We had three hurricanes, and effectively lost 2.5 months of programming last year. Well, I just wanted to let everybody know that last June I did a hearing test, a word analysis test at my audiologist. The first time I did it, I got 100% in the left, 0% in the right. I had another one in April where there was progress, but just last week we did the same hearing test, 100% in the left, 60% word recognition in the right. So I asked my audiologist, what happened? And she says, your brain is making new pathways. It's rewiring itself. I had no idea it even could do that. So I think that God gave us one of the most complex instruments in the universe, the human brain. And I didn't even ask it to help me, but it's helping me help here again. So I really feel just blessed by that. And I just want to say this because I want to thank everybody for all their thoughts and prayers and all that, the good vibes sent to me over the last year and a half. I want to thank you so much that we've had a breakthrough. Also, I just wanted to mention, I don't typically do long intros, but I felt like I just wanted to mention that I did have a wonderful time at the temple groundbreaking in Tampa. And my friend Neil Anderson gave me a book and wrote a nice little note to me. Elder Anderson and I have become friends, and he is a person who enjoys the program. He's told me as much. And I just want to say my pastor, Dan Miner of the Harvest in Sarasota, and his wife and some friends were treated very well. And I think this will open up for a lot of wonderful interfaith opportunities. Okay, I'm sorry. I just had to say those two things because they're top of mind. And actually, my kind of co-host. So basically, Jim Bennett is going to have a hybrid role. He's going to act as a co-host as well as a panelist, and partly because Jim has been at this since the early days, and I feel that you can maybe ask some questions and also give us some insights normally that maybe people wouldn't know about background stuff. Then we're going to open this up to the conversation with people. Now, Jim, welcome to the program, and thanks for being my co-host today.
I'm honored. I'm thrilled. This is going to be a lot of fun.
And I'm also very excited about our guest here, Jana, who I'm just recently got to know. And I'm pretty sure I've seen your Mormon Stories interview that you did a while back. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure I probably saw it. Maxine Hanks, of course, one of the September 6th, a legend, OG all the way. And it's been a real honor and privilege to be a friend, most importantly, with you. And this is your first appearance here on MBR. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on the program. And Patrick, you're an awesome human being who I've known for like 4 years now when we first met at the Mormon History Association. So Jana, Maxine, and Patrick, welcome to the program.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Yeah.
So, Jim, I just wanted to get kind of, first of all, I actually want to do a share screen real quick. And why are we having this panel discussion? Well, because just a few days ago, there's this series called An Inconvenient Faith that was released. A lot of people wondered, okay, who's funding it? What's the purpose of this series? And I felt like it was really important for people to kind of understand what this is about. And so I want to just share real quick a screen share, and I want to encourage people. This is the channel. It's called and by the way, can you all see it? Okay.
Yes.
This is the channel, An Inconvenient Faith, which went from 0 subscribers to 1,600 in less than a week. And this is the first season, An Inconvenient Faith. And I also wanted to direct people to this statement that I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I actually encouraged, and Jim and others encouraged the individual who actually was behind this production to actually identify themselves so that we can let people know that there's no church funds going to this, or no, this is not some rich, clever anti-Mormon that's funding this. This is actually a labor of love by Robert Reynolds. And so I want to encourage people to go to his YouTube channel and read the statement so you get an understanding where he's coming from. And I think there's no agenda here. I think it's really important, other than for us to really have these important conversations. This is just the beginning, and we're hoping that it will open up a lot more conversations. And that's why I've been promoting it and really behind it. And so, Jim, I just want to open this up to you real quick, since you are my co-host and also somebody that's been involved in this for a while. I just wanted to kind of get your perspective over the last few days, what's been going on, the kind of the maybe the reactions you've been getting, and maybe some things that you wanted to address about the series as well, and just tell us how and why you got involved in the first place.
Sure. Well, I don't want to speak too much because I really want to hear from our three non-hybrid panelists
Yes.
who I haven't spoken to since. It's been years since they were filmed, longer than I thought it had been. I said to Jana, "Oh, geez, that's 4 years ago," and she said, "Nope, 6." I went, "Huh." So I really want to hear from them. I'll just give you a brief thumbnail sketch. So I sort of launched into this weird world when I wrote my reply to the CES letter. And at one point, somebody said, "I'd really love to see you go toe to toe with Bill Reel." And I said, "I don't want to go toe to toe with anybody, but I'm happy to talk to anybody." And so I immediately got a phone call from Bill Reel, and we did 14 hours of podcast discussions, which really sort of shifted my approach, because after I had done the CES letter reply, I would get all these emails like from missionaries, from people saying, "Thank you, you helped me sort of save my faith." And after I went on Bill Reel and later on John DeLynn, I would get messages from people who had left the church and said, "You didn't convince me to come back to church. You did, but what you did was help me better understand my family and friends who are still in." And I realized there that there's this huge community sort of on the borders of the church, whether they're on the inside of the edge of the church or on the outside of the edge of the church. There's just this huge community there that we don't talk to, and that there's a whole lot of pain there. That, these are mixed faith marriages. These are people that struggle with children who have left, and children who have left struggle with their parents who stay. And so this kind of became my focus in the things that I've been doing. And after the Bill Reel podcasts, I got a phone call from a guy named Robert Reynolds, who I didn't know from Adam. And one of the first things he said to me was, "I'm a Jim Bennett Mormon." I thought, "Oh, wow, I didn't know there was such a thing." But he started, this was in 2019. And so he had already, Patrick, I think you had already filmed your stuff by then, because when I came on board, there was a lot of footage that was already in the can. But Robert said, "Look, I'm doing this project and I think it's right in line with what you were talking about." And he said, "My problem is the biggest struggle I've got right now is that I don't have an editor." He says, "I've got Hollywood, I've been giving this to Hollywood editors who just don't understand the material. And I have given it to Latter-day Saint editors who aren't very good." And I went, "Well, I don't know if I'm very good, but I've got enough skill in that area to be dangerous, and I certainly can understand the material." And so for several years, I was the primary editor on the project and went through, this thing has gone through more iterations than I can count. It was originally going to be a 2-hour documentary. We were talking about shopping it around to Netflix and Hulu or some other streaming service. It was originally talked about, okay, how could we make this interesting to an audience outside the church? And that quickly became that really wasn't what Robert was trying to accomplish. The goal here essentially was to find, to model how people stay, and to also show respect and empathy for those who leave, which I think a lot of people who are watching it are kind of missing that. I mean, I kind of, my role now is Robert has asked me to go out and talk about this on podcasts, and I'm monitoring the comments and I'm engaging on Reddit and wherever else. And I'm seeing a lot of people who have left the church who are really unhappy with it because we don't blow the lid off the church the way they want us to. And I'm not seeing a lot of faithful members who are upset at us, except for maybe Cardin Ellis, who has compared John DeLynn being in the podcast to white supremacists talking about Judaism. And I said in the comment, "Look, buddy, this last time I checked, John DeLynn wasn't trying to engage in genocide." I mean, that's a really offensive comparison. But for the most part, but the one reaction, and then I want to turn this over to because I really want to hear uh, um, Jana and Maxine and Patrick talk about their experience and their reaction to it, because I think they were blindsided when it came out. Robert sent out an email to everybody, says, "Hey, I'm releasing it. Watch out, here it comes." But I showed it to one friend of mine who is on his way out of the church. We've had long conversations, and he's just frustrated with the church. And he says, "I'm on my way out at the end of the month." And I said, "Oh, I'm really interested to see what you're going to think of this." And he came back to me and he said, "Well, Jim, it's really well done, but it's just not for me." Mm. And I said, "Oh, can you elaborate on that?" And he says, "Well, it seems, I mean, you treated the people who left with respect, but it seems all geared to get people to stay. Mm. And I think the church is irretrievably broken. I don't want to stay, and I don't want to listen to people who tell me that I should stay. And so this just isn't for me." And I mean, he was very kind. He wasn't hostile about it. But I think that is largely the reaction of people who have left. I mean, the comments, there are a lot of comments saying, "Oh, this is lovely, we love it." But there are a lot of angry comments from people who have left, and they insist that you've edited this dishonestly. I mean, this one guy has put this one comment everywhere because we quoted David Nielsen, who was the whistleblower on the SEC Ensign Peak thing. And we didn't give him a full quote where he rails on the church. We used him expositionally to sort of set up the issue. And they said, you're dishonest, you're misrepresenting him. And I went, well, that wasn't the intent. I can understand why you would feel that way, but I think a lot of people are sort of missing the point of what this is. And I've been talking to Robert about this, and he says, "Look, we're not trying to convince anybody to stay. We're not trying to convince anybody to leave. What we're trying to do, this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. This is an attempt to have people on both sides of that border, on the borderlands of the church, have their voices heard." And you know, when I wrote my CES letter reply, I talked about that as, look, this isn't going to convince Jeremy Runnels to come back to church. But when I went through my own weird little faith crisis at the age of 18, when I read The God Makers, my first reaction to reading all of these things about the church that just sort of blew my mind and freaked me out was not, "Oh, I'm going to leave." My first question was, how do I stay? I want to stay. How do I stay knowing all this and knowing all this messiness? How do I stay? And so I wrote my thing as a resource to help people who want to stay, not to convince people who have left to come back. And I think that was very much Robert's intent here is, look, if you want to leave, we love you and we respect you. And, you know, I mean, and that's something, I mean, John DeLynn commented in a Redditor comment because people are complaining that we've made John DeLynn look like an apologist, which, I mean, I don't think is particularly fair, but we do have him saying some nice things about the church. And John DeLynn said, "Look, is this perfect? No. Is this the best representation of Exmos from a faithful perspective? By a mile. It's like there's nothing better than this." And so if you've left the church and you watch this and you're still angry that some of us are still in, I would hope you would see in this an attempt to show grace to the people who leave, an attempt to say, "Look, yes, we are staying, but we respect your decision. We want you to be able to leave with dignity. We want you to be able to know that we still love you and that we respect you and that hopefully we can give you a fair hearing." And I think that's, again, the beginning of a conversation. There isn't anything like this out there as far as I know. Mm-hmm. And so I am really happy with it. And so that's my long meandering intro, but I very much would like to hear the reactions of the three people who are in it as to whether they're happy with it too.
Well, I agree. I want to hear their thoughts. And thank you for giving us that really important background because I think it's really important that people understand what the intent was with this series. And so I want to bring in the rest of the panelists into this conversation. Well, let's start with Maxine. And I just wanted to, we talked beforehand, we kind of talked about a few things that you wanted to address based on your appearance. So I'd just like for you to kind of address some people's criticisms and maybe push back and also make some clarifications.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, actually, first, I just want to answer Jim's question and say how the series hit me when it was released, and I saw it the other day, and I was blown away. I love it. And I wasn't sure how I would feel about it because Robert was planning to include people from across the full spectrum. He wanted to include John DeLynn and Jeremy Reynolds and Bill Reel and the conversation between Jeremy Reynolds and Jim. And then, and then he also wanted to include clips of church leaders, Relief Society presidents, President Nelson, various apostles. And I was nervous. I pushed back when Robert was working on that. I pushed back and said, oh, why don't you just stick with the paradoxical people in the middle if that's your message, that this is paradoxical, there isn't one clean answer. There isn't one position that's the one and only true position on Mormonism. I kind of pushed for why not stick with the paradoxical, the middle way people in the middle. And when I saw what he and Jim had edited and what he had assembled, I was so blown away. I cried as I watched it because by including everyone across the spectrum, from the most disillusioned critics who've dropped out and don't want to come back to the leaders, the women and men who lead the church, and some really beautiful, honest clips from the church leaders, and then all these people in between. What this documentary manages to do is to completely deconstruct any hegemony, any bias, any claim that there's only one true position or perspective on the church. It shows that what Mormonism is a multiplicity of perspectives. There isn't one true position or perspective that we all should adopt and take. People on both ends will pressure inactives who leave, and people who leave will pressure those who stay. That, we shouldn't be doing that. We should all stick together in solidarity and take one position. I've received that pressure a lot since coming back to the church. And I received it when I left, 30 years earlier. But what this documentary does is reveal the paradox and the multiplicity and the beauty and diversity and the true inclusivity of the Mormon tradition in a way that I have never seen anything else do. I've never seen any program that has included the full range of diversity of the Mormon experience. And so not only does this actually better reveal the paradox and the paradoxes, because by revealing all of the different positions, you see the paradox much better and more easily. That Mormonism is a very paradoxical faith. It's a demanding faith. It's an inconvenient faith. It's a paradoxical faith, almost more than anything. And so this documentary really succeeded at revealing the paradoxical nature of Mormonism, but the true inclusion, the radical inclusion that the restoration was, that Joseph Smith and his collaborators envisioned to really have a truly inclusive faith that was a universalist salvation. And this documentary does it. I think it's brilliant. And the last thing I'll say about that is that people who accuse the documentary of taking one position or favoring one, that's a misreading. Because if the documentary was going to take one position, it would have only interviewed people who took that position. And if it was not going to respect or honor those who are disillusioned and who've left, it wouldn't have included John and Bill and Jeremy. And so Robert, the director, wasn't trying to come up with one answer. He wasn't biased, and he wasn't trying to show everybody, all these positions, and then at the end say, okay, here's the real position. Here's the best one. Here's the true position. He really wasn't trying to do that. He was trying to show that this was his personal search. He was on a personal search and went around and interviewed everybody to collect all these points of view because he was struggling and wrestling with all these things. And so he edited and clipped the things that he thought were clear and compelling. But the answer to his quest in this documentary, and the answer it provides, is not that there's one true best position or perspective. The answer was there is no one answer. All we have is a multiplicity of perspectives and journeys and paths and people across the spectrum. And what I love most of all, every single interview, every person's perspective, every person's path is a revelation.
I love that, Maxine. I love the way you do it. And we'll get back to your the other question I asked because I actually
Yeah.
want to get the responses from the rest of the panelists on that question that Jim posed. Let's go with you, Patrick, next. And I'd like to just kind of get your thoughts on how you feel it's been received and what your thoughts and how it's impacted you.
Thanks, and thanks for having me on. And I want to echo what Jim said earlier. It was I wasn't expecting that to drop on YouTube this week. That wasn't on my new releases list. I Especially because I think I was one of the earlier ones that the Robert interviewed, and it was a long time ago. It was 7 or 8 years ago. And then he and I have, we've kept in touch. We're friends. And so I've asked him how it's going. I saw, an early version of it, but even that was probably 4 or 5 years ago.
I
And
remember that well. It didn't go well in my recollection.
uh, it's just a testament, Jim, to how you and Robert just kept at it, right? And made it better. And it's so as I watched through the episodes, I had much the same reaction that Maxine did. I was really impressed. I was, from the very beginning, I was impressed with what Robert was trying to do and his heart and what he brought to it, what you brought to it, Jim. With kind of honesty, with a kind of empathy of really wanting to listen to people's voices. Um, I, are there more voices? I think if we tracked it by minute, are there more people who are still inside the church than outside? I guess so. And it's probably 60-40 or maybe 70-30 or, I don't know what the minute count is there. So it does weigh in that direction, but I don't think it has to be a 50-50 thing, where everybody gets exactly equal time because I don't think that was the nature of what it was. And so I viewed it again from my own perspective of knowing Robert, knowing Jim, knowing their hearts, knowing what they were trying to do with this. And I sent Robert a message and just said kudos. I mean, I think he's pulled off what he tried to do. And it's an ongoing conversation. There's so many more voices. Every person's experience matters. Everybody's going to come at this a little bit differently. But in terms of the range of voices, the range of stories and experiences, and like Maxine said, the different Mormonisms that we saw on display here was pretty remarkable. Especially, I think if you add all of them up, it's probably 3 hours or so. There was a lot packed into that time, and you could have gone 6 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours, right? But within the space allotted, I was, um, the last thing I'll say is that of course the first thing I did because I'm vain is I flipped through like, okay, what are all the spots where I'm in it, right? But also how did that edit go? And I completely forgot what I said 7 or 8 years ago, and I was pleased to reflect that I believe all those things still. And I've grown a lot. I'm not the same person I was 7 or 8 years ago, but in terms of my core convictions, in terms of what I tried to represent, both as, and I was on there, and I think all of us were that there's both as a scholar and as a believer, right? And that's always a line that I'm walking in interviews like that. Well, which I think there were even a couple times I was like, do you want me to answer now as a historian or as like the guy who goes to church on Sunday, right? Because it's all integrated in my head, but actually the way I talk about it sometimes is different, right? In my approach or my tone or my vocabulary. So I was really happy to see, to me, it reflected back, at least to me, the kind of integration that I've found between scholarship and faith. And I hope that's a journey that at least it exposes people to, while also totally respecting that there's really good and smart people, who have made different calculations than I have, and we're all part of the same conversation.
Love it. That's great, Patrick. And Jana, I want to bring you into the conversation and address Jim's question. And welcome. I know this is your first time on the program and it's first time getting to know you. So I just love to hear your voice and what you have to say.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation to speak to this. Yeah, I was blindsided, as everyone was, by the timing. I knew I'd given this interview probably 6 years ago, and had looked forward to what the project was going to be. Had kind of an overview of Robert's intentions. But yeah, I know it took on a lot of different forms, and there was a lot of feedback, I think, as some people saw the documentary. But I think, and I just want to acknowledge the complexity of trying to put together something like this, where there are so many different voices, because I think inevitably, I mean, this is such tender territory of our lives, is our faith life, and especially when people start to have really hard questions and conversations about things that are really uncomfortable, especially initially, to even have the conversations. Um, I just want to acknowledge that complexity of how hard it is to do something like this. You will tick people off. No one will be satisfied. You're not going to satisfy everybody. And there will be very few who are fully satisfied with what's going on. We're typically a group of people who wants a narrative. We want, when one narrative stops working for us, we want a new narrative. And a lot of people watch these kinds of things looking for the new narrative. And there wasn't, that I saw, a real narrative in it, but a lot of people see a narrative in it, right? And it's usually just depending on where they situate. So as I watched it, I was kind of like Patrick. I relate to that, like, oh my gosh, where was my voice used? What's the context? How was he get it? How am I going to come across? I don't remember what I said either, you know. Um, and also, I don't feel like in my interview I kind of knew what we were going for, but I didn't have anything specific that I was really understanding that I was speaking to. So I was just answering questions. And I work with people. For those who don't know me, I am a faith transitions coach. I've been working with people now for almost 9 years in their messy faith journeys. And yeah, how you're going to take in a project like this is highly dependent on where you situate and what your experience is. And in some ways, I think that's a great sign that he hit something well. I mean, when I started seeing criticisms on both sides and everywhere in the middle, and also praise from many that situated in different places, I think it accomplished what Robert wanted, hopefully. I almost feel like I need to go back and watch it again and to really have a full opinion of how well it was done. Like, there's a lot about it that I love. There were so many moments and voices that I love. I love that there is such a spectrum of voices there. And in my work, I think it is one of the most difficult things we do is to give dignity to people on all sides of the argument. And if there is one giant strength I see in this, is it accomplished that, which in and of itself is not an easy task. Because it's one of the things that brings me the most sadness in the people I work with. And I work with a lot of mixed faith marriages and families and people, and it's one of the hardest things to do, is to give dignity. And I know I've read some of the criticism of it, and just the fact that it didn't have a narrative that we were trying to sell is hard for some people. Some people really believe that that's what we should have around the restoration, around the church, around Mormonism, is we have to figure out the truth. We have to say the right narrative. We have to have all of our good reasons for it. And so I think there's some critics out there that this is too postmodernist and we're giving too much credit to too many people. So I think that's a tension that we have to work with as we talk about this documentary, as we work within Mormonism, is that there is a tension with allowing voices that are different than ours and giving it dignity. This is not an easy prospect.
Yeah, that's great, Jana. I really appreciate it. I would love to compare notes with you because I've kind of become an unofficial therapist for people in mixed marriages who reach out to me because they feel like, well, you're not a hater, but you're not a member. So we feel like it's a safe space to talk to you. And so there's a lot of off-camera stuff that I do, just counseling couples and individuals who are having faith crises and everything like that. And so I see it all the time and experience it. And so that's really a ministry you have. And so I want to honor you with that endeavor. And so, well, I wanted all three of you now to kind of maybe just address, like Maxine, there's a few things that you wanted to address, maybe make some clarifications. And I also want to open this up to both Jana and Patrick. If you feel like you need to make some clarifications about how maybe some stuff you said, this would be an opportunity to do that. And then we'll open it up a little bit too after we do this question, that if you guys want to interact and ask questions of others too, feel free to. We'll have that conversation as well. So Maxine, why don't you start off?
Sure, thanks. I've heard interesting criticisms about it, and I wish that everyone who watches this could find someone in this documentary who voiced their perspective. That was my hope, and that may be largely true. But then one criticism I've heard is, who's left out? Who was left out? And the dominance of men versus women, that it seems like it's 2-to-1, and white men, versus people of color. That's been a criticism. My friend Tom Murphy pointed out that how can you do a segment on the Book of Mormon without a single Native American on there talking about it? And that was an important critique. He's right. And so there are gaps. There are voices missing in this that I wish were there, so that everyone who watches it would find someone who's voicing their perspective. So on the other hand, it's imperfect, and it's got gaps and missing voices, but it still went further at radical inclusivity than anything I've ever seen. But a couple of criticisms. Oh, and by the way, too, there were people who said, gosh, I wish I'd been in it. I love Britt Hartley said that. And I think there were other people who often get quoted in things and who felt like, how come I wasn't included? So there are people who are jealous they were left out, which I loved. But yeah, just a couple of quick things. 2 critiques of things I said I should just clarify. I gave this interview back in 2019, and there's always a lot more context and material that you share in an interview, and then they just pick out the clips they want. But one thing I've been criticized on by Bill Davis and others is my comment that even the harshest critics of Joseph Smith all admit that they don't know how he did it. And what I meant by that, I should clarify.
And they don't know how he did it, constructing and creating the Book of Mormon, right?
Yeah, how he.
Not just the Book of Mormon, though.
Right.
Yeah. Well, mainly they were talking about the book of, and I think I was talking about the Book of Mormon in that quote, but how did he actually do it? What was his process? And so the two criticisms I got for that were, well, that's not true. Critics of the Book of Mormon, they have figured out how he did it, the process he used. And the other criticism I got was, well, you're saying then that it's utterly historical. It was a historical document. Well, no, I wasn't saying either one. Because I was saying that it's a mystery, nobody's really exactly sure how Joseph Smith produced the Book of Mormon, what his actual process was. It's not clear. There's no consensus. There's no agreed upon view that can explain, and there's no one method that can explain his process, how he actually did it, And I was talking about process. I was talking about the how, not the what. I wasn't talking about the text or its historicity at all. I was just saying that it eludes us, his process, because the product is so complex. The Book of Mormon indicates that there were all kinds of processes going on, including revelatory, mystic, visionary processes involved, and altered states of consciousness, and stream of consciousness, and narration, and his own personal views show up in the text, and his life, his relationships show up. So it's a very complex process that I think is impossible to pin down as one specific process. So I just wanted to explain my comment because I have talked to the harshest critics of Joseph Smith since the early 80s, 1981. And in these private conversations, they have admitted to me that they can't say fully or completely or definitively how he did it, but they have some good ideas about how he did some of it. And so these theories come up, and people, scholars and historians, present theories about how Joseph was able to actually produce it and narrate it. And they're all good, they're all interesting, they all help explain some aspect. But there's no one theory that can explain his full process and the full text. So I just wanted to explain that because there are plenty of critics who think they have figured it out and who will say that. But no one theory answers the whole thing. So that was my response to that criticism of my comment. And I wish I had said it a little more carefully. I wish I had said, even the harshest critics still don't know exactly or fully how he, they can't explain the full process. The other criticism I got was my comment about how LDS women have more types and varieties and levels of ministry and priesthood exercise. I'm trying to remember how I said it, but they have more types and levels of ministerial and priesthood opportunities in the church than what you find in other traditions that I participated in. And I've been criticized for that statement because people automatically assume that I'm saying Mormon women have more authority, priesthood authority, than a minister or a priest in another tradition. And that's not what I was saying. People get hung up on the issue of authority and ordination in terms of one particular position, ordained position in another faith. But I spent years in other faith traditions and going through formation process and clergy formation and ordinations. And what I learned and what I saw was that in other traditions, women and ministers are trained and often paid for a particular position that is a position that they're qualified for and they keep. And there may be multiple duties in that position, but it's a specific position. And in the LDS Church, it's a lay ministry, this vast, global, robust lay ministry where we receive callings and setting apart, and we're, receive the calling by the laying out of hands. But we shift and move and train and cross-train and change positions. And so in the lay ministry, we have a much bigger, broader swath of ministerial positions that women can fill. And in the LDS tradition, we used to call the setting apart ordination. The word ordained was used to describe on all three levels, the lay ministry, the elect lady, Emma was ordained, the Relief Society officers ordained, the temple, you were anointed and ordained. So the word ordained was used to describe the positions that women did receive. But I stand by my comment that not that Mormon women have a higher priesthood authority or ordination than a priest or a bishop, but they have a wider swath. They have more variety and types and levels of ministerial roles in the LDS Church, which include all three levels: the lay ministry on the ward level, the missionary calling or office, the Relief Society, the women's order and offices within that, and the temple priesthood, as well as general church committees and projects. So just the scope is wider and the diversity of roles is greater.
Well, thank you very much for being able to clarify that and be able to get that word out. So I want to go with Patrick and then Jana, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I don't have I don't think I have any corrections or anything
Okay.
like that. What I said. I probably could have had a better hair day, but that's all right. Uh, um, what one of the things that really struck me as I was watching it, I actually had multiple moments where I genuinely felt the Holy Spirit as I was watching this. And it came in moments of sort of deep empathy and compassion for the people that I saw on screen. As I heard their stories, and a lot of times it was the stories of struggle and of pain, and that can be really hard to capture on film without cheapening it or sort of making it a token or something like that. But I felt like as I watched a lot of those stories, that these were like sisters and brothers who had gone through real stuff, and they were opening up on camera to talk about these things. And for me, I was really struck by the relatability of it, and grateful for this opportunity for us to just sort of peek into the faith life and the faith struggle of so many of our sisters and brothers. And so that I thought that was a big part of my response to it, was just uh, gratitude for this venue to expose me. And some of those people and some of those stories I'd heard before, others were new to me, and told in a new way. So I was actually really grateful for that.
Awesome. Love it. And Jana?
Um, yeah, I don't know that there are any corrections either in what I said. I mean, I did notice as I watched it, I wanted a fuller discussion in a lot of places. Like I wished I had had maybe an idea of the arc of where some of my quotes were going to be used, and to be able to develop it a little more, rather than snippets of so many people, go a little deeper with a fuller thought around something. That's hard to do without context and not knowing where your quote is, what context your quote will be used in, right? But I think that my focus then is similar to my focus now. I certainly didn't have a personal agenda of how do I get people to stay in the church. I don't think I've ever had that. That's not the way I approach my work. This part that Jim mentioned, having empathy for those who leave, that resonates deeply for me in the work that I do. I have a really, I consider it a sacred job, and I thank you for saying it's a ministry, Steve, because that is how I feel about it. And I care deeply about the dignity of people all along the spectrum. And like I said, it's hard for us to give that to each other. So um, even though I want deeper context, I think I see in the questions that people have around it, they want something a little deeper. And this wasn't the project for that, but maybe this is an invitation. Like you said, it's a beginning of a conversation. Maybe this is an invitation to take some questions that people are having about it, and for anyone else wanting a project, to take that up and explore different aspects of what this is bringing up for people. Because I am someone who longs for deeper conversation. The only other quick thing that I would say is I think it's tempting when you see a collection of people like this to assume that they're all coming from the same place. I think we do this to each other. All the people who leave think about it this way and they do it for these reasons. All the people who stay are thinking this and doing it for these reasons. And I like exposing this idea that we do have different approaches. And it's not just about wrestling with it to come up with the right answer, but it's also exploring how people deal with this prospect of Mormonism. There are a lot of different hows. There's literalism in this, and that's an important part, but then there's also people who are taking it from a more metaphorical place. And that's hard for us to accept how other people do it as well. So I think that's a whole can of worms. So, but one of the things I would say is don't assume that if you are getting an apologetic feel from this, that is how everybody feels. Or if you're feeling challenged by some of it and you think that people are just out to to expose the church for all the problems, don't imagine that everyone in this is also having that agenda. Those agendas are very personal, and I just think this was open conversation. So just make your assumptions while you're watching it, and notice that watching this is kind of a mirror of where
Mm.
you are in this, which is very important. Each person is due that the way that it hits you, and that can be really revealing of what's going on for you in your own faith journey.
Awesome. And I just wanted to say, Jim, when you first, you and I first started talking about this series, um, you had said, really, I feel like the heart of this series is the LGBTQ part two episode. And so I thought maybe you felt that was like probably one of the most important episodes in the series. So I just wanted maybe to kind of talk about that, and then we can open it up to the other panelists as well.
Well, sure. And I want to respond a little bit to what everybody
Sure, please
said.
do. Yep.
Well, just because I think that the criticisms raised are entirely legitimate. I do a podcast with Ian Wilkes, who is from Yorkshire, England, and his reaction when he saw it was, "Where are the international voices? These are all Americans. This ignores the church anywhere else." And a little bit of inside baseball, and I don't. Patrick saw an early cut of this at a gathering, and that was back when it was a 2 hour thing, and we had front loaded the beginning of the movie with just there was a lot of Book of Mormon, there was a lot of Book of Abraham. I don't think we even have any Book of Abraham in the final cut, but there was a lot of like really dense doctrinal and historical information, and we showed it at this screening, and it was very clear people were not responding to it.
Hmm.
And then Robert turned up the lights halfway through the screening, and said, "You guys don't seem to like it. What's wrong with it?" And I went, "No, Robert, keep going, because the good stuff was the race stuff, was Darius Gray talking about his experiences, and the LGBTQ stuff. I mean, the John Gustav Rathall story. I've seen that now. I've edited that a bunch of different ways. I've watched that story, and I am always touched by that story. It always brings me to tears to watch this man's story. And I said, if you just keep going, these are the stories. The stories are the heart of it, not the doc. And so at the end of that screening, we came away and said to Robert, okay, we can't front load. We can't, say we're going to do all the boring stuff here at the outset, and then we're going to get all the wonderful stories. It all has to have that same kind of personal interaction, because we don't have all the answers. What we have are models of good people who confront these issues and deal with them in all these different ways. Jeremy Runnels did a debunking of my debunking of the CES letter. And the central premise of it is that Jim Bennett is not defending Mormonism in his CES letter reply. He's defending Jim Bennett Mormonism. And he puts a little C there. It's a copyright Jim Bennett, his version of Mormonism. And I say, you know what? You're right. I own that. That's absolutely right. But there is no Mormonism that exists as some sort of Platonic ideal outside the lived experience of all of its individual church members. Everybody lives their own personal version of this faith, and it's different for everybody. And I think the power comes from those personal stories, not from, the apologetic arguments. You go back and forth, and there's just so many. Actually, probably the most recent footage in it is me. It's in the Book of Mormon episode. And Robert said, we need something to talk about a historical Book of Mormon. And so I set up my iPhone and filmed myself, and I had schmutz all over my shirt, apparently. And so if you watch it, they zoom right in on my face, so you can't see the schmutz. But to me, those kinds of data points just they're just kind of uninteresting to me at this point. I mean, I'm happy to engage with anybody that wants to talk about Nahum and wants to talk about, all of these sort of little data points. But the thing that makes this compelling, at least for me, is the personal stories. I'm not looking for answers. I'm not looking for sort of just, here are all the official church answers that answer every question. What I'm looking for is, how do you do it? What's your experience? And where I think this thing succeeds is that you get so many wonderful stories like that. After that screening, actually, one of the things Robert said was, because another one of the complaints was, it's like 99% men. I think we only had Deidre Green in there. I'm not sure if there were any other women. Sandra Tanner was in there already. So that, I think, inspired the decision for Robert to reach out to Jana and to Maxine and say, we need to have women's voices in this. And that created an entirely new section. I mean, originally these were sections of a feature-length documentary, and that became its kind of its own episode. And Maxine's story and Jana's story, I think, are what make those things compelling, rather than, here we're going to review all these little data points. I think that that's the strength of this piece. And so I think the criticisms absolutely are legitimate. I think people don't also realize how much ground we're trying to cover here. These are huge issues that have had encyclopedic works written about from every perspective, and we're trying to bottle it all up and give it to you in a nice package in 2 to 3 hours, and it's just not possible to include everything.
Also ground literally, in the sense of, like, my understanding is, like, Robert was paying out of pocket for most of this, traveling, hiring film crews, right? So this was not just a labor of love. This was a labor of enormous financial investment. And at a certain point, right, you got to just say, enough's enough.
Yeah.
And actually,
right.
I also want to point out, somebody on Reddit pointed out, because I put out a post on Reddit for those who had any questions or comments that they wanted to address on this. And so one of the people said that, well, I watched the video and it had ads. He says it's not monetized. I want to make it very clear to you that YouTube's running those ads. He's not making any money on it. And I actually recommended to Robert, maybe you need to monetize it, because then you can actually have control on taking those commercial breaks out. But Jim, you wanted to say something or clarify on that?
Well, I think we're using an awful lot of copyrighted material in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get away with that because we're not monetizing it.
Okay. That's good to know.
I think if we were to monetize it, then we'd have to go to the South Park producers and get, and right now it functions under fair use.
Okay. Got it.
But so I think that's a challenge there. But I want to address very quickly, because initially Robert really genuinely did not want his name attached to it.
Right.
Says, I want this thing to speak for itself. I want the work to speak for itself. I don't want it to be about me. And he's very genuine about that. I mean, there's no false modesty here. He just feels like the world needs this. So yes, he funded this whole thing out of pocket. So any of you guys who are out there saying, well, the church is secretly funding this, or John DeLynn is secretly funding this, or nonsense. This is a labor of love, a passion project for Robert Reynolds. And it would not have happened without him, and it's entirely his baby. One of the things that was interesting, so we sat down behind the scenes before it was released, and he says, I'm just not going to say anything. And we released it, and there was no name attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people start saying, who funded this? Who funded this? Who funded this? And one of the things that was interesting about that is that I got the sense that the commenters asking the question were trying to figure out which team to root for, right? Because it wasn't clear. Because it's like, oh, well, if the church funded this, well, then I can hate it because I've left the church and so it's awful. Oh, well, John DeLynn funded this. Well, then I can hate it because I'm in the church. And, the people were looking to, it does not, Maxine, we spoke like right after it was released. You called me and you said it gets rid of the polemic. It does not lend itself to an easy polemic. I mean, it's now sort of settling into everybody saying, well, this is clearly coming from a faithful perspective.
Mm.
And to the extent that Robert is still a faithful, believing, active member of the church, that's correct. But Robert was very much solicitous of making sure that the other points of view were represented properly and represented appropriately. And I said to him, look, Robert, right now people are just curious. But now the longer you go without saying who it is, they're going to get suspicious. And eventually it will overshadow what's happening because it will become who is doing this. But except for Stephen, you have the story about John DeLynn. You want to tell that story?
So the night it's released, I texted John the video and I'm like, John, have you had a chance to watch this series? And he says, Bob Reynolds is a great guy. And I told Robert, I said, Robert, he's already, the people are already saying your name, so it's going to get out. So you got to get out in front of this and let people know that, you don't want, I even told him, I said, listen, I deliberately went on Mormon stories and told everything so that then people didn't have to dig and try to find dirt on me. I just said, I put it all out there. So, I controlled the narrative of my story. You need to do the same thing with your story as well, because this is the key thing. This is about the people and their stories and their journeys that they're on. And that to me is, I think, the most important thing to take away from this series is that, first of all, as God told me when I first started this channel, that we're all image bearers. So even if there's people that you disagree with, just remind yourself, Steve, fellow image bearer, fellow image bearer. And I really felt like that same spirit was in this program, where you're respecting the dignity of the fellow image bearer and treating them accordingly. And one of the things is the idea is like, look, this series is for people that are maybe on the edge. They're not sure what they want to do, if they want to stay or they want to go. But this gives people maybe, okay, there's people that understand my dilemma, where I'm at. And then also at the same time, let's have empathy and sympathy for those who have left. And I just remember, look, I've dealt with PTSD and spiritual and religious abuse in my past. I think that's why I resonate so much within this community. And I just think and I've even told atheists this. I said, listen, I'm a pro-atheist evangelical. And they get like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm a pro-atheist evangelical because I feel that there is a therapeutic aspect to atheism. That because even once you've been so hurt that even the concept of God is triggering you, that you almost for your own mental health actually have to become an atheist in order for that to no longer have any power over you, so that you can work on the things, the anger and the bitterness and all these things in your life that maybe you're experiencing, and the hurt and the pain. And so I think that's where the empathy, that's why I have openly promoted this, contacted many influencers. I don't normally do this kind of thing, but I just feel this is like a really important series, and folks, just watch the stories and what they have to say. I'm sorry, I don't normally talk a whole lot during my podcast, but I really felt it was important to get that out there. So we got about another 15, 20 minutes here to play with, and I just want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard here. So if any of you have any questions for maybe the other panelists or any comments you'd like to make, I'm opening up the floor.
I just wanted to add one quick comment to add to what you and Jim said. We're addicted to the polemic in Mormon culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's either apologist or critic. It's either defending it or attacking it. We are addicted to that polemic. And this documentary really does shatter that polemic brilliantly by showing that there are far more positions than that. And then what you both said about stories. There was no one in this documentary who was trying to tell anybody else what they should believe or the position they should take, or trying to convince anybody else that, hey, what I'm articulating, this is the way to go, and y'all ought to, be where I'm at. Nobody in that documentary felt that way or wanted to convey that. The problem that we have so often in Mormon culture is that when people share their own true, authentic experience, their story, their narrative, their path, people get upset and defensive because it's different from theirs. And so people they're not okay with that. But we've got to get comfortable with that. And this is what the documentary, one of the most brilliant and I think healing things about it, is that it's showing that every story is a revelation. And it's okay. Let everybody have their path, because their own soul or whatever is guiding their path. So let them have their path and don't take it as an attempt to convince you that you're supposed to be where they are. That's just not it. And then one last comment about the diversity. So many women have said, oh, thank heavens there was at least one section that dealt with women's status, and I've really appreciated that. And there could have been more. I would have liked to see a whole section on the Mother in Heaven. I would have loved that. And there could have been more. Also, I was so thrilled. I was so happy that the Sisters in Zion and Jen Lee Smith, were in there. And yet I saw Jen Lee Smith once. I would like to have heard from her a lot more. We needed more people of color in there. We needed more women, but still it was an attempt to be as radically inclusive and diverse, but there are definitely gaps.
Agreed. I mean, I can imagine if we're talking about shattering polemics or other things. I mean, not just hearing people of color in the race one and only, queer people in the LGBTQ one. Like, we need to start to value all of these voices in all the places, right? I mean, that would be paradigm shattering, right? To hear women talk about not just women having priesthood, but talk about the larger issues around all of that. So, I think we still have this thing where those voices belong in a certain place. And sure, we need to listen to them, right? So yeah, and no one is ever going to be able to do all of this. I mean, what we're talking about is is really, really, really hard to do. We still need to experiment with it, but it's worth being said. And I don't hold any, that's not a criticism of Robert or the editors or Jim or anybody else. Like, we're there's no way to do all of that perfectly. I think that I have a lot of grace for people putting their heart and soul into something like this and putting something out there. Like, if someone was looking for perfection, we're never going to put the conversation forward at all, right? So let's have tons of grace in that. Grace is hard to come by sometimes in the polemical discussion, right? And what I long for, not just in projects like these, but within Mormonism, is more of the feeling it's the how again, not the what. But it's rather than being so declarative about all the things, it's being exploratory. Like, I would just love to sit. I don't even like to try to define myself as a believer or not a believer or whatever. I'd rather just talk about being a seeker. And I don't have to choose between in my work, gratefully, and in my personal spiritual quest. Like, can we just be explorers and seekers and find the importance of all of our voices and our experience? That really, really speaks to me. So I think if people can look at this from that lens, how can we explore with the people in this docu-series? How can we take what we like, leave what isn't ours right now? We don't have to decide as a whole the worth of anything or the usefulness to our lives. Just take what you can take. Hopefully there's enough in here that something is resonating with you, and believe yourself when something is challenging you. Get curious about it. There's a reason it's challenging you. And we don't have to make it wrong. We don't have to make you wrong. Let's just explore together.
Love it. Patrick.
One of the things I really liked, I think one of the ways that the film humanized people and really did center stories, like you were talking about, Jim, is that I think one of our biggest problems right now, and it's a human problem, is it's so easy to reduce people to positions. And I think there were a lot of points throughout the different episodes that resisted that. So when you have John Dehlin and Bill Reel and Jeremy Runnels saying things that they appreciated about the church, that humanizes them, right? When you almost every voice of people who are still in the church, especially who got more than, just a little bit of screen time, said at some point, like, the church isn't where it should be on almost every issue, right? whether you're talking about race, whether you're talking about gender, whether you're talking about LGBT issues, the way that we think about prophets and prophetic authority, so these are internal people who've chosen to stay with the church and for their spiritual communion, but have said like, this place isn't perfect, and we have that humanizes people. Like these are real people, and so that I think if people watching it, I understand that people come to it with positions, but if they can sort of push pause on that just a little bit, and say like, I don't want to be reduced to a position. Are there some ways in this film that at least it models in just a few minutes, right? It's not the same as going to lunch with somebody and spending a few hours with them, but at least in just a few minutes, I can see like, oh, that's a human being, right? I come to different conclusions to them, but that's a human being who's wrestling with this, who's thoughtful, who's reasonable, who's trying to follow the spirit as best that they can, try to follow their intuition, their reason, their conscience. I think there's a lot we saw here about conscience and what it means to wrestle with what it means to follow your conscience in a very complicated world. And so I think if people can just pause on their position statements for a moment and focus on the people in front of them, both as they're watching the film, but of course, as we go out into the world, that helps reduce some of this polarization, some of the fracture that we see in so many areas of our life.
Yeah, fascinating. It
Can I,
is.
can I, ju-
Like,
can I
please,
say
Jana.
something? I 100% agree with you, Patrick. I think that's really important. One of the things that I've seen out there, and I just think this might be a good place to mention it, is that if you are very dedicated to a certain narrative about the church, whether it's all in or all out or whatever, I think this is the very thing that people are complaining about. That it's a fearful place for many people, usually who are addicted to the polemic, to hear someone's voice and like I said, give it dignity. Because I've heard criticisms like, "Oh, don't have too much empathy for that voice," or don't give me a voice who just stayed with that wrestle and just decided to stay. We feel this thing inside us that really gets churned up. So I agree. I think the story is the magic of any of it. Of you know, it's always, I think, more interesting and more powerful than let's talk about the issues. And also, that's really hard for a lot of people. It's really hard to hear a story like John Gustav Rathal, so, dear friend, if you're all in or all out and wanting a narrative, his story will challenge you. Um, and so I've seen people jumping to criticism of that very thing that I think is the magic, and that I hear you guys saying it's the magic. But I've also seen that is the thing that can be really, really tough. It's hard to argue with someone saying this is how I feel, but then we have to shut down. I think it's a real danger when we shut down our humanity because we don't want to take in this person's experience or give it any validity.
Mm,
We're in a real danger zone.
powerful.
Yes, and along with that, can I add one thought to what both Patrick and Jana are saying? Even each one of us who was interviewed in this, we're more complex than we may come across. People tried to pigeonhole us. I was accused of defending Book of Mormon historicity simply because I was saying that we don't fully understand Joseph's his own inner process. I wasn't defending historicity at all. It's not my view at all. I was talking about his hermeneutic, his process. But each one of us, if you sat down for lunch with any one of us who were interviewed in that, viewers who might want to assume that each one of us is representing a certain position would be very surprised to see how complex and deconstructive and unorthodox our views are on all these topics. And then along with what you said, Jana, I think that it could have been mixed up a little bit more. They could have used particularly the sisters and people of color and LGBTs a bit more in some other sections. Although they did try to mix it up quite a bit. They used a lot of us in all the sections, But I think you're right. I think that could have been mixed up more because I love what you said, Jana, that we need to hear what our LGBTQ members are saying about Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith's process, and we need to hear what some of the men think about women's status in the church, and all of it.
Hmm. Love it. Jim, I just wanted to invite you as my co-host if you had any final questions or if any of you had any final words, because first of all, I think this was a fantastic panel and it's a little over an hour. It just feels like we covered so much in a short period of time. Jim, was there any final thoughts or any questions you'd like to say,
I
Jim?
am just grateful for these three lovely people who have joined us here.
Mhm.
Grateful for their insights. Grateful for this would not have happened if we hadn't had such magnificent human beings. Even if we're reducing them to their position or we're, you know, everything else, the dignity and the beauty of the souls of these people, I think, shine through when you watch this. And I think that's one of the reasons why it is still for me. I mean, I've seen this material again more times than I can count, but it's still affecting for me because these are genuine human beings and none of them were compensated to be in this. They just participated in this because they felt that this was something that was important and that these were stories that needed to be told. And there's just a beauty at the core of that just thrills me. And so I am just so grateful for their contributions, and I'm very grateful for the other contributions that are in this, and I am very grateful that I had a chance to be a part of it.
Awesome. And so I told you all before we started taping, if there's anything that we weren't able to cover or anything that you else you'd like to address, I'd like to open up the floor for our three panelists as well.
I have one last thing. I don't want to be the last word, though. I want to end on a much more loving, positive note. But I have one last correction of my own comment to add that I forgot. When I was quoted as saying that a lot of women are leaving the church to pursue ordination outside because they don't see priesthood, they don't see ordination here. And then they showed a picture of or my friends at Ordained Women, and I thought, oh no, everybody's going to think that I'm saying you didn't need to do that. You didn't need to leave. And that's not what I was saying at all. I left the church for 28 years to pursue ordination in other traditions. So I absolutely validate all of my friends
Hmm.
who left to pursue ordination. But what I meant, and the whole clip wasn't there, but what I said was I came back to try to help us see what we're not seeing. And so what I meant by those two comments was women have to leave and go elsewhere because it's not visible here. It's buried. Women's priesthood and ordination they're buried in LDS history. You can't see it. And it has to be recovered and excavated and fleshed out and named and operationalized. It's not operationalized. And I've been saying that clearly for, the last 15 years since I came back, but I just wanted to clarify that because we can't see it. It's there, but we can't see it. It's buried. It has to be excavated, named, fully operationalized. So I just want to be clear that I'm saying that women's ordination of priesthood is there, but it's not operationalized. It's not functioning like it should. It's functioning as ministry, diverse, robust, amazing ministry, lots of authority, lots of positions, but it's not fully named or operationalized or fully recognized. We still have a long way to go to finish that process.
Okay, well, Jana, Patrick, any final words or things you wanted to get in before you wrap this up?
No, just that I was very truly grateful to be asked to be part of this. I mean, I, I've only been on the scene for, maybe the last 8 or 9 years as someone who maybe has a more public voice about this. And so I was a little starstruck and just so honored to be among such amazing voices in in this conversation in the docu-series. So it's an incredible honor to be part of that. And just that I still just really believe in the concept of more dialogue, more heard conversation. I think we are more whole as people. I think we are better off on our journeys when we can take in more and more of reality, where we don't have to discount things that are difficult, where we can just embrace that life is messy, faith is messy, and just make room for one another. I think that's the challenge of the gospel. Make room for one another. Um, so anyway, I'm regardless of any of the complaints I have about it, and I may find more as I watch it again. Overall, I'm proud to have been part of it, and so happy for that it's out there, that there's a place where there's such a range all in one place. And yeah, I'm fully behind the idea behind this.
Wonderful. And Patrick.
Let's carry it forward.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, in our current culture, both our religious and political culture right now,
Mm.
there's so much that brings more heat than light. And I'm just kind of tired of it. And so I'm grateful and I'm gravitating or trying to gravitate to things that bring more light than heat these days. And I was really grateful to watch this because I think that's exactly what it did. That I'm interested, like, as Jana just said, I'm drawn and convicted to Jesus's ministry of reconciliation, that he breaks down the walls between us and fills in those gaps and tries to reconcile those who feel far away and those who feel near. That's how Ephesians describes his mission, and I think this was I think this series was a really great way to try to model that kind of ministry. So thanks for all the light that you brought to the internet, Jim.
Well,
Great.
oh,
I
let's
love
just
it. And just real quick, I just wanted to remind folks real quick, and then Jim, you can wrap this up. It is the YouTube channel called An Inconvenient Faith. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to the channel. Engage the conversations that are happening in the comments as well. It's really important. And just check out the videos. There's a total of 9 episodes, so you could watch over the course of a few days. And we'd love to also hear your thoughts on this new series here on MBR as well. So I'm looking forward to engaging those comments as well. And Jim, was there anything else you wanted to wrap this up?
Nope. I just still very grateful, and I think these folks are wonderful. And I mean, when people thank me, I mean, this is Robert Reynolds's baby. I want to make that very clear. Like when I first went out there, a lot of people were saying, it looks like Jim Bennett is the driving force. I was along for the ride. This was Robert Reynolds. I am so grateful that he let me take the ride with him. And I'm grateful that this exists, because I think this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. I mean, this is in some ways an awkward, clumsy step forward, but the idea of creating an environment where the polemic isn't dominating and where we can have empathy and respect for one another, no matter where we situate. I think that's exceptionally rare, and I think it's just such a beautiful thing.
Awesome. Love it. So folks, we're going to have links in the description so that you can go and watch that series. We'll also have links in the description for those of you who would like to financially support us here at MBR. We do appreciate the donors. We couldn't do it without you. And remember, the most important thing is this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.